Hello! Welcome to another midday recipe with me, Chef Day. As some of you know, I'm going to be here every day at midday. Might not just be me. We're also getting some of our ex-students, our graduates, to film from their home and film recipes that they really want to share with you guys. It's not just going to be me, but it will mainly be me. So the deal is that you guys can ask questions, and the more questions the better, preferably about food. Doesn't have to be about the recipe that we're going to be making today, but you know, any food questions that you've got. I'm particularly interested in those back of the cupboard ingredients, those long forgotten ones that it would be great for us to use at the moment to make use of the food that we've got in the house, to stop you from having to go out too much, stop you from having to spend money as well, and just, you know, use up those bits and pieces. So a lot of the recipes that I make with you guys, I show you versatile recipes where you can swap things out for what you have in your cupboard. So you guys are going to ask me questions, right? I'm going to look on here and be able to see your questions. So I'll just refresh my page and I should be able to see them. So just a word of warning that with the questions that you fire through to me, I can only see about 3 at a time. So if it gets a bit busy in there, then it would be great if you can help me out, because you'll be able to see them more than I can, because I'm cooking at the same time as reading your comments. So let's just check as well that the live is the right way round, because I think you would probably prefer for me to be showing you a recipe this way up rather than that way round, which has happened before. But let's see. Yeah, we're looking good today. We're looking really good today. Okay, so I can see already Ariel. What a lovely name. Really lovely name. Hello, thank you for joining me. Nikki, thank you for joining me today. So today we're going to be making an epic Sunday nut roast. And the reason why I stress the word epic is because a lot of people don't really like nut roast because you've had one in the past and they had a really bad rap, and fair enough. Hello Gloria, thank you for joining us today. Yeah, in the 80s, nut roast weren't that great. There were these like packet mixes that you would get from health food shops, and you would add water to it and bacon, and it wasn't that great. But if you make your own, they can be wonderful. They can be really wonderful. So before we get started, as always, there is a rainbow somewhere here today, and let's see if any of the kids watching, and I know that there are some kids watching with their parents today, let's see if they can get the location of the rainbow first, and if by about 15:15 they haven't been able to find it, it might be quite a difficult one today, then it can go over to the adults. So let's just see if the kids can get it first. Right, okay, so I'm just going to show you the result of what we're making today. So this is our beautiful nut roast. I've just opened it up as well so that you can see inside it. So this is obviously a small one. I would say this is just about enough for 2 people, really. Yeah, that's fine for 2 people, because you have to remember as well that a nut roast is quite dense, so it is going to be quite filling, so you don't want like a really massive piece. But for me and Jeff, this is absolutely fine. So this is the size that we're going with today. Hello David, thank you for joining us. And I've just cut it open as well so that you can see inside, so it's nice and moist. And really that's what we're going for. We have to try with our nut roast to get it as moist as possible, whilst also holding together. So this recipe is really a balance of wet and dry, which is something that is repeated again and again and again throughout lots of different recipes. So it's something to watch out for, it's something to pay attention to, and if you can understand those principles of cooking, you can really become much more of a creative chef, and you can go off recipe, which is the ideal, because I know what it's like to follow a recipe. Any new recipe, you know, you look at your recipe and like, two onions finely chopped, and then you go over to the side of the kitchen to get your onions, and you're like, how many onions was it? And like you keep doing that, like back and forth and reading and rereading, and it takes hours to cook from a new recipe. So the best way to be able to make food from scratch regularly and quickly is to be able to go off recipe. So that's what I try to teach people how to do. So you will see with this lovely nut roast that I made earlier today that I have put onions on top of it as well. So onions are going to go inside it, but I grabbed some of the, one of the elements that's going to go on the inside and I put it on the outside as well, just to make it a bit prettier. Because to be honest, nut roast, it doesn't look that pretty. So you can either dress it with something like I have with these sliced onions. Sandra, thank you for joining. Rainbow, oh. Shh, Gloria, you can't say just yet. Not just yet. Let's see if Talisa and Teddy get on, because he's an expert rainbow spotter. And so yes, I put onions on top of it, but you could put something like seeds on top as well. That looks really pretty. Be careful with putting nuts on top, because they can bake too quickly, and then you'll get burnt nuts on top of your nut roast, which isn't very nice. But seeds work really, really well. And as I said, I've just used onion slices, which was something that's going in there anyway. So I'm not using another ingredient. Okay, so on to today's recipe. I'll just put that to one side. And I must say that the reason you saw it right off. Okay, so the rainbow wasn't that hard today. Next time I'm going to make it incredibly difficult for you. I'm going to make it like that tiny. And I'm going to put it on like the back of my neck or something like that, and then you'll never be able to find it. So I must make it harder. So the reason why I am teaching you guys a nut roast recipe today is because at the moment it can be very, very easy for every day to feel like the same day. And it can get to be that Groundhog Day, and I think that isn't great for us mentally. So it's really good to mark these different parts of the week in a way that we normally would. It's something that's quite familiar to us, and we would normally do this on a Sunday. It's quite a traditional thing to do. So today we're going to have a Sunday dinner. Isn't something that we do all the time at all, but it's like, it feels like at the moment I want to know that today is a Sunday. I've been losing track of days, and yeah, I just want to have a bit more kind of like regularity in my week. So that's why we're doing the nut roast today. So, right, Yvonne says, I'm struggling to see the recipe ingredients. Okay, so we will take a photo of that, and I'll put it in the comments, but I'll be talking through everything anyway as we go, and then I can always recap as well. So Maria says, hello, last Christmas I made some gluten-free corn polenta, nice but dry the day after. Oh, that's a shame. Yeah, I mean, you can always reuse something like that and put it into, like a bread soup. A bread soup is really, really lovely, like Papa Pomodoro. It's really, really nice. Anna says, me too. Yes, okay, that's okay. I will be talking through all of those ingredients as we go through, so you will be able to hit all of them, and I will take a photo at the end. If I forget, please remind me. Sometimes I do. Okay, so first of all, we have 100 grams of cashew nuts. So these are cashew nuts. I did toast them in the oven. You don't have to do this, but I'm a really, really big fan of how they taste when they're toasted rather than when they're raw. So I just put them in the oven for about 15 minutes on 150 degrees until they start browning. Yeah, and that's it. Super easy. And I must say that just like this, they're a really, really lovely snack. I think the taste far surpasses when they're just raw. Really, really like them like this. So you can actually do like a big batch of them, use some of them for this recipe, and then use some of them for like a stir fry, like cashew nut stir fry. Amazing. Okay, so we have, 50 grams of cashews here. As I said, I have toasted them, you don't have to. And then we've got hazelnuts here that are toasted. Again, you don't have to do that, but it's going to make the hazelnut flavour come through much more. So I toasted these again for about the same amount of time, about 15 minutes on 150 degrees, and then I rubbed them together between my hands and just got the majority of the skins off that I could. And you'll see that there are some that you just can't get them off, and that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about that too much. You can buy these already toasted and ground, and when you buy them toasted and ground, they're not ground into a powder, they're ground into small pieces, which is actually what we want today, because we want some of that texture. That's one of the nice things about a nut roast, is that it's got texture and bite to it. I always remember a lovely nut roast that I had made with Brazil nuts, and occasionally I would like crunch into a Brazil nut, which is so creamy and delicious, and that's what we're looking for. We want those like bitty pieces. Okay, so we're going to start with them in our chopper attachment of a hand blender. So this is a wonderful little gadget that I absolutely adore. The ones that I bought have lasted a really, really long time. They were only 24 quid from Argos. That was it. And so I always make sure that when I buy a hand blender, it is over 500 watts. Because when you're doing things like grinding nuts, it needs a bit more power and you don't want to burn the motor out. So we'll just pop this on here, there we go, and just give it a quick blast. And so I am just pulsing it there because I want to be really careful not to make it just into a powder. We're not making nut butter here, although that sounds good. We just want it to be crushed up enough so that there is a powder, because the powder is going to really help glue everything together, but we want those chunky bits in it too to give it texture. So there we go. Okay, see if you guys can see that. There we go. That's about how much we want it to be fine, and then we've got lots of yummy little bits in there too. So we can put that to one side, and then we get a lovely big bowl out here, and we have in here some onions. I've already peeled them, just so that you guys aren't hanging around watching me peel onions, which isn't the most interesting. We've got 150 grams, or just around 150 grams. It doesn't have to be exact. You don't want to cut into an onion just because the whole onions that you've just put on the weighing scales is like 142 grams. Don't worry about it. If it's 140 grams, if it's 130 grams, it's still going to be fine. If it's 160 grams, it's still going to be fine. So you can be a bit looser with this recipe. So we're going to slice them finely. I am going to use my... Oh, Karen, thank you for joining me. Lovely to see you here. So I'm going to use my mandolin. I know mandolins scare a lot of people. I know they do. But you just need to be really, really careful with them. You can just slice them finely, just make sure that you really slice it finely, or you could grate the onions as well. That's also an option. If you do grate the onions, then squeeze some of the water out. So we'll just slice these finely. And the reason why we want to do it finely is because we're not going to cook these onions before they go into the nut roast. We're not going to fry them, nothing like that. We're just going to put them straight into the nut roast. Ah, Karen's in her PJs. Do you know what, underneath here, I might still be too. You'll never know. No, that's fine. That's fine. I totally don't blame you. It's a Sunday, Karen. And Robbie joined as well. Thank you for joining us, Robbie. So as I was saying, I'm going to slice these finely because we're not going to cook them beforehand. We're just going to get them to cook in the nut roast. So they do need to be sliced fairly finely, because if they're chunky, you're going to get that raw onion taste, which isn't very nice. Although that said, my grandfather used to eat raw onions like they were apples. So there you go. Might be a new thing. Maybe like eating raw apples, raw onions like apples is going to be like the new avocado. Never know. Don't think so. Ah, Nick is in her PJs as well. We should just have a PJ party. We should just say like on Sunday, we're just going to all meet. We're still going to be in our PJs. We're committed to that and cook together. Or I'll cook and you just watch, which is more like what's going to happen, right? So just to say, like, a few people have asked me if I want to release the information on the ingredients beforehand so that people can cook along with me. So I used to do this a while ago. First of all on Periscope, if you remember those days, and then on Facebook Live. And what we found was that people, they preferred to watch me do this live and ask questions as I cook. And then, if it was something that they did want to make, then they went out and got the ingredients and watched the video on playback whilst they cooked. And that means that you can stop it and start it whenever you want. You can go back to bits where you think, what did she say then? I can't quite make it out. And, you can, you're more in control of it, basically. So we're going to do it that way for the time being. So we've got our sliced onion in here, and now we just want about 100 grams of carrot. So Paul says hi from the Dordogne. Oh, that sounds nice. That sounds lovely. Brittany, my very first time tuning into your live recipes. I'm very excited for this nut roast recipe. Me too. I'm very excited to eat it as well. So we're just going to grate the carrot into here, and I'm doing a fine grate. Because carrot is, it's a hard vegetable, so we want it to cook well in the nut roast. And when things are in a nut roast, they're going to get steamed. That's really the cooking that's going to happen in there, because it's surrounded by lots of other stuff, and it's got that oven heat in it, and basically that's what it's going to do to the veg in there. So you need to take that into consideration with the veg that you're putting in there. So with the carrot, I wouldn't put chunks of carrot in it raw, because what's going to happen, they're just going to still be hard at the end of it. So that's why we're grating the carrot in today. But this is a really, really flexible recipe. So, you could mix it up and put something like butternut squash in it instead. You could use leeks instead of onions, red onions, even spring onions. Really, really lovely. Really lovely. And, it can be interesting to play around with a recipe that is quite autumnal and wintry, but with more spring veg. And we're going to be getting more of that spring veg coming along now. Okay, so we've got our veggies in there. And now we'll just add some sage leaves. So again, my herbs are in foil. So I was showing everyone this yesterday in our, what did we make yesterday? We made a rhubarb crumble with rosemary and almond. So nice. So, Chris, good morning from Southampton, Ontario, Canada. See, I thought you just went like Southampton just up the road, but in Ontario, Canada, it sounds really nice. Really nice. I'm getting jealous of where everyone else is at the moment. Okay, so we need about 3 grams of sage. So it's quite a lot of sage, because this recipe is a sage and onion nut roast. So we want the sage and we want the onion to be quite prominent, and that's why we're putting quite a lot, both of them, in there. But they are very, very easy to come by ingredients, and they're cheap as well. So, some of you might even have some sage in your garden. You might even have some sage in your neighbour's garden, which they might not mind you picking. If it grows abundantly, if they've just planted it and it's like that small, like, don't go and pick it. but if it's a big bush, then you can go and grab some. I'm sure they won't mind. Okay, so with sage leaves, you just pile them up on top of each other, and then we finely slice. Being careful not to slice our fingers. Okay, so can you use dried sage? I've got loads. Okay, so I'm not a huge fan of dried herbs, apart from things like raw food recipes, because, like a raw lasagna, lovely, but I put dried herbs in there, because you don't want to put the fresh herbs because of the reaction that happens. But I would say, in this recipe, if they're going to soften up, then that's fine. And I think, like, in a nut roast recipe, it will soften those dried herbs. The reason why I don't like dried herbs too much is because they can be a bit twiggy. So it's more to do with the texture than the flavour. So if you're using something and it's really going to soak in with those other ingredients, which I think it probably will with this, then I think that you'll be all right. And it's great to use up those ingredients as well. So Virginia said, if you use dried sage, how do you convert from fresh? Oh gosh, that's a very, very good question. So in here, we've probably got about 1 tablespoon of fresh sage leaves. So I would say maybe about half that, because if you think like, the amount that you can get into 1 tablespoon is a lot more of the dried herbs, because they're bitty, they're in smaller bits basically. So I would say, maybe in this recipe for these quantities that we've got, try one teaspoon, no more than that. But we do want the sage flavour to be quite prominent. We are going to balance it out with some other flavours, but the sage is very prominent in this recipe. Okay, so now we're just going to add some stock powder. So it is 1 teaspoon of stock powder. So this is my preferred stock powder. It is by Marigold, and I like this because, as you can see, it is an actual powder. I don't like those little cubes that you get, and especially those cubes, like the Knorr ones that are kind of a bit gooey, because you put them into a stew and then you spend 10 minutes kind of like with a fork mushing them up on the side of the pan trying to get them to disperse. Whereas with this powder, oh Sharon, thank you for joining us. With this powder, you don't have any of those issues. So, and you don't have these like half cubes of stock in your cupboard, which that just really drives me insane. I'm not that anal. Okay, I might be. So we've got half a teaspoon of salt in here, and that can go into. And then we've got our garlic. So the only garlic that I had in the house at the moment is this lovely garlic here. So this is smoked garlic, and it tastes absolutely divine. So I actually bought this online from Amazon, which, yeah, it's amazing. I've got to find somewhere to hang it in the kitchen because it just looks so cool as well. So we've got smoked garlic in the recipe today, but you can just use regular garlic. It's just because this was all I had, which makes me seem like a real, poncy chef, doesn't it? The only garlic I've got in the house is a string of smoked garlic. Yeah, so we're going to slice this as finely as you can. But again, this is going to just steam actually within the nut roast. Okay, and we'll just pop that into a bowl as well. So in the bowl so far, you've never heard of smoked garlic. I bet it is divine. Oh my god, smoked garlic is amazing. In fact, most smoked foods I absolutely love. Smoked salt, smoked tofu, yeah, and I've actually got a smoker as well, so I do smoke my own food, which we could do a class on one day because it is quite interesting. But smokedness adds a real umami flavour to any food. It's really, really divine. But you just end up smelling it all the time. So that's how I spend my spare time. So in here we have 150 grams of finely sliced onions, 100 grams of grated carrot, 3 grams of sage leaves. That's fresh. If you want to use dry, then I recommend using no more than 1 teaspoon of dried sage, 1 teaspoon of stock powder, half a teaspoon of salt. We've got our 2 to 3 garlics in there. It depends on the size of them. I hate it when people say, you actually have to use 2 cloves of garlic, because some of them are tiny and some of them are big. One of the things that I always try to do is I always try to get the large garlic, because it just saves time. Because when you end up with these tiny little garlic cloves and you have to peel all of them, it's really annoying. So I tend to get the bigger garlic. And then we are going to add a magic ingredient to this before we get our hands involved. So here we have yeast extract, and this is also another yeast extract made by Viridian. This is a really, really good company. You can't find this everywhere. I was really lucky to be able to find this from a local health food shop. So basically, this is Marmite or Vegemite, but we try to buy it from, you know, a better producer, because don't particularly like who Marmite or Vegemite are made by, but that's completely your choice. You can just use Marmite if you want, but Meridian are a really, really great company, and this one is just one from Tesco. So we're just going to pop in 1 teaspoon of this. It is awfully sticky, which is why you need a spoon. Another spoon, just to scoop it out and pop it in there. Okay, so Tanya, thank you for joining me. Right, so what's the yeast extract going to do? The yeast extract is the thing that is going to make it taste meaty. With a lot of vegan, vegetarian recipes, they can be more on the sweet side because vegetables have a natural sweetness to them. So it's great if we can use ingredients like the yeast extract or things like the brown rice miso. There's also a lovely product by Hodmedod's, which is Fava Bean Umami Paste. You know, it has that salty savouriness, so it's just going to balance out the sweet carrot in this recipe. Okay, so we just need, what else do we need? Oh, juniper. So this is an optional ingredient. You don't need to add this, but I've got, you know, lots of random ingredients in my cupboards, and I'm just trying to use them up, basically, so that I'm not going out and getting food unnecessarily. So Louise says, I often use Marmite in my cooking, it's great. Yes, it's great. I have to tell you something though, I absolutely detest Marmite. Jeff loves it, and so he has it on toast, and then he tries to kiss me, and I'm like, no way, no way, go away with that Marmite breath, no. But in recipes, it's lovely, you know, and there's a marked difference, because when you put it in a recipe like this, you can't really taste the Marmite, you can just taste the savouriness, and it just balances it out. So Denise said, good morning from Savannah, GA. Where's GA? I don't know, where is that? Savannah sounds lovely. Savannah sounds very, very nice, but I don't know where GA is, so Denise, if you can tell us, that would be great. And Katie, thank you for joining us. Okay, so with juniper, it doesn't completely grind in the same way that black pepper does. You still get these kind of like bits that are kind of together still. But that's going to go in there, and as we mix everything together, it will break down a little bit. Nikki, you put it on roast potatoes sometimes. God, that's great. I'm going to do that today because actually after this we're going to have nut roast, of course. Of course we're going to have nut roast, and we have to make roast potatoes. I swear that Jeff could eat like a stack of roast potatoes like that. I might actually have to see one day, see how many you can eat. But I'll try it with the Marmite on it, definitely. Georgia, you're in Georgia. Oh, lovely. I tried them tiny mortar and pestle, and hello from Lanzarote. Lanzarote, lovely again. Thank you for joining us from all of these different places. So we've got all of our ingredients in there, all of our wet ingredients, and we've got our dry ingredients here, and then this is also another dry ingredient that we're going to add, which is our ground flaxseed. So this is flaxseed that is already pre-ground, really is such a good thing to have in your cupboard, and this is the thing that's going to help hold it all together. This is going to be one of the things that is going to glue it all together. Flaxseed is really, really great at that, and you'll see it in various recipes. You see it in cake recipes as a flax egg, where people use the ground flax, add some water to it, and that becomes quite thick, and then you can add that to your recipe, and that's known as a flax egg. Because we're going to have loads of liquid going on in here in a second, loads of moistness, we are going to have to do that, so we can just add it as it is. So Kathy says hello from Detroit. We're being very universal here. It's awesome. Really, really good. Okay, so at this point, we're going to get our hands involved. And I know that so many of you will want to get a spoon and be like that, but that isn't going to really do the job. Because what we want to do is we want to massage this a bit just to get that water out of the veggies, and that water is going to soak up the dry ingredients. The dry ingredients are going to mix with the wet ingredients, and that's going to become the glue. That's going to be the thing that's going to like hold all of this together. That's what we're looking for. So Chris says Savannah, Georgia, I meant to say. So, oh, that's okay. That's okay. Brilliant. Okay, so going to get one hand involved in this, which is always a good technique because, you know, if you need to add something else, then you've got a hand that is clean. So as I'm mixing that, I'm massaging it and I'm just squeezing it together, mixing all of those flavours in together. And I can feel and see actually that there's liquid in here. And that is what we're looking for. Okay, Sherry, I haven't spoken to your senior in ages. Lovely, lovely for you to join us. Thank you. Gina, good evening from Melbourne. Oh, good evening, of course. Good evening from Melbourne. Right, okay, so that is that done. Now we just need to add our dry ingredients. So, of course, we have our nuts that we've blitzed before, and then our flaxseed. So, we've already got a spoon in there. So, 1, 2, 3. So 3 tablespoons of flaxseed in there, and then we're just going to mix it all together. Oh, and I can already smell those different ingredients. So I can smell the hazelnuts, I can smell the sage coming through, I can smell the juniper as well. Juniper is quite a strong flavoured ingredient, so you do have to use it sparingly. So now we're just going to pop this into there. I'm just going to extract a few of the onions just to pop on the very top, because it's really nice to see a few of those onions on the top. There we go. And we do want to flatten it down. Don't leave it loose, because we want it all to stick together, remember? Now, if you don't have a pan that has a lot of its non-stick life left, some of you will know what that means. So, you know, you buy these non-stick things and for a while they can be really, really good, and then after a while the non-stickness of it can start to fade. Then you can put a little bit of oil in the bottom. So, but just try and add, you know, a very, very tiny amount. Just think, you know, the amount that you would use to brush a cake tin if you were making a cake. Like that's the only amount that you need, just like so that it's got a smear over it. That's all. Okay. So Danielle said how much of the hazelnuts? So the hazelnuts that we added was 35 grams. In a moment, I will go over all of the ingredients again, and also I will take a photo of that ingredients list, because I know like some people can't see it very well, and I'll put it in the comments as well. So we are almost done with this. So it's been really, really easy. You know, I don't think there's anything that's that complicated in there. Virginia said, I've ground flaxseed. How to convert the amount. So the flaxseed that I use is ground already. So if you've got ground flaxseed, then it's just the same amount. It's 3 tablespoons of the flaxseed. If you guys have actual flaxseed at home, the only way to really grind them is in a high-speed blender. So don't necessarily mean something like a Vitamix, although a Vitamix does do it, but something like a NutriBullet, like a Nutri-Ninja, you know, those things that are quite common. You might have one of those for making smoothies. They actually grind flaxseed really, really well. This type of thing doesn't grind them very well. With flaxseed, they'll just go round and round and round and round, and you'll stop and there'll still be flax seeds and they won't be ground, and it will be annoying. So Nikki, what other nuts could you use? Could you add tin lentils? I have cashews and Brazils at the moment. Yes, definitely. You can use whatever nuts you have. So I'm just sprinkling some olive oil on there, just to, because I want those onions at the top, just to get a really nice colour on them, so that will really, really help with that. So, okay, so just to talk about what Nikki said. So yes, of course, you can use whatever nuts you have. You can really, really change it up. You can even add like an extra sweetness with something like pecan, Brazil nuts are really, really lovely in a nut roast, but it's a very, very versatile recipe. So you can just use this as a blueprint. So with the cashews and the hazelnuts, yes, you can change it into other nuts, but you can also use seeds as well. So if you know somebody who has nut allergy, you can make a whole nut roast just using seeds and no nuts whatsoever. You can also use something like ground almonds. So if you've already got ground almonds in your pantry, in your cupboard, you know, because you use them for like a cake once upon a time and you didn't use them ever again, then you can use them in this recipe. Well, it'd be nice if you could combine them with some actual nuts that haven't been ground, so you get that chunkiness, you get that texture in it. Yes, you could also add tin lentils. So the tin lentils, they're going to be quite wet, so just bear that in mind. That's going to be I guess like a good substitute for like the grated carrot and the onion, the thing that will have the wetness in it. So just bear that in mind, Nikki. But yes, this is a very, very flexible recipe. The nuts, as I said, you can swap out. The onions, you know, use some of the other onion-like ingredients that we've got, like leek and spring onion. Red onion would be lovely. With the carrot, use other vegetables, use other root vegetables. Something like parsnip would be lovely, and that would make a real change for something like a nut roast, because if you add more unusual, unexpected flavours, it can be really, really lovely. And then with the sage as well, you don't have to use sage, obviously, like, but it's great if you can have some sort of woody autumnal herb in there. It's very, very nice. So Denise said, love the live poll. This is so interactive. Good, I'm really, really glad that you guys have enjoyed this. So we are at the end of our recipe now. So this would go into the oven for about 45 minutes at 180 degrees. Once the edges start to brown, you might see the onion on top of it getting quite brown as well. If it gets to the point where you are worrying that it's going to start burning on top and the inside hasn't had enough time to cook yet, what you can do is you can either just use a bit of foil, or you can just use another lid, well, okay, another tin. This is actually the base of a cake tin, which is really, really useful. I use this quite a lot. And you can just pop that on top and cook it for the remaining time with this on top. So that will mean that the onions don't burn, the onions will be fine, but the rest of it will still continue to cook. And so this is our finished masterpiece. And I actually let it sit in the pan for a couple of minutes before I took it out. So that just lets everything settle a bit. It makes it a bit easier for you to handle as well because it's cooled down slightly. And then I just put a knife down the edges. And actually, this is a really good thing to show you guys. So I put a knife down the edges and then I push it out a little bit. So that movement is very, very small. I don't know if you can see that, but basically with the tip here, I'm pushing away from the tin, and what that means is that the edge of the knife is lifting up the bottom slightly, and that is really going to help you when you want to flip it out and then pop it onto your plate. Okay, so you want now, you just want the recipe. Okay, well, I will recap the whole of the recipe for you. So we had 50 grams of cashew nuts. I had toasted them, you don't have to. And then we had 35 grams of toasted hazelnuts. As I said, you can buy them pre-toasted and pre-ground if you want to. And then we had 150 grams of onions, which I sliced finely using a mandolin. You can also grate them. 100 grams of grated carrot, and 3 grams of sage leaves. You can use dried. If you're using dried, don't use any more than about 1 teaspoon of dried sage. 1 teaspoon of stock powder, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 garlics sliced, but of course, you know, if you've got tiny little garlics, then you can use more. And also that's something that's quite subjective. 1 teaspoon of Marmite or yeast extract for that meaty flavour, 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed, I added some juniper to mine. You don't have to. I just use it because it's in my cupboard and it goes really, really well with this. And then I popped it all into the pan with a little bit of oil, and now I'm going to bake it at 180 degrees for about 45 minutes. So that's our recipe today. As I said, I will take a photo of the ingredients list there because I know it's been quite difficult for a lot of you to see it, but you'll find that in the comments. So please do let me know. Oh, actually, where's the rainbow? Where is the rainbow? If any of you guys can tell me where the rainbow is today. So in each episode, we have a rainbow featured somewhere around here, and you guys have to guess where it is. So let me just read Nikki's comments. Some great tips. I never knew that about adding a lid and that preventing the top burning whilst the inside cooks. Yes, and you can use that for a lot of different things. So like the crumble that we made yesterday, same principle with that. Behind your laptop, yeah! And this is actually, well done Natalia. This was actually the same rainbow that we used yesterday, and at the bottom of our rainbow there is a pot, but it's not a pot of gold, it's a pot of hummus. And this is my continuing vegan joke. Because, you know, whatever makes you laugh at the moment, right? So I hope that you guys, rainbow next to the smokehouse, yes, all of you guys did guess. Well done. So I hope you guys are inspired to make this recipe. Hit me up and let me know if you've got any questions about this. If if you found things in your cupboards and you're like, oh, can I use it? Can I not use it? I wish I could ask Day. You can ask me. Just send me a message on here, or you can join our community hub. So our community hub is our group that we've just recently launched, and you can ask me questions in there and we can get chatting about food, which is always a good thing. And Joanne said, thank you, love your cookery show. P.S. Can you use chia seed instead of flaxseed? Yes, absolutely. I think chia seed will work really, really well with this. And again, that's something that people have in their cupboards that they don't necessarily know what to do with. So thank you for pointing that out. I will wrap up now. Thank you for joining me and have a lovely day.